Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our Fireside chat on bridging supply chain gaps to secure critical minerals. As Andrew mentioned, my name is Rowan Phendler. I'm a partner at Granger, Reis. I'm delighted to be joined by William Landtsheer, Head of Business Development at Traxys. William brings over 4 decades of experience in the metals industry and now plays a pivotal role in shaping global supply chains in critical minerals. Today, we'll explore strategies, resilience, and the future of this vital sector. Thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome. Not really 40 years yet, but I'm reaching that point in the next 10 years, most probably.
We tend to round up, but it's all right. What are the most effective strategies you've seen for mitigating supply chain disruptions in the critical mineral space?
Yes, so for a company like Traxys, I think the key thing, because we are a trading house, right, is to make sure that we always come true on our deliveries to our customer base. It's very critical that when you engage in delivering products, you actually deliver the products and not create delays, which in turn could create problems for our customer base. So you need to make sure that you can execute on your commitment. So we try, I think, the best way to characterize it is to say that we need to diversify our supply side, not to have our 2 feet in the same shoe. And we look at multiplying sources of products across the globe. Traxys is a global company, and we source from Pacific, from Africa, from Latin America. We deliver to Europe, to China. So we need to be very nimble in the way we manage the supply chain. And for every product that we do trade, we always have multiple sources of supply. And we can play between those different sources in accordance to the market conditions. So that's I think the key thing. Maybe the second point is that you need to get physically closer to your customer base. And we've seen of late a trend that is plain to see to get production assets closer to the consuming markets. I think everybody was happy for the last 30 years to have to rely on third parties far away most of the time to get security of supply, but today people want to make sure that they can have access to the molecules, to the units, close by enough. And we are coming from a global thinking to a more regional thinking now. So we see lots of projects developing regionally that are addressing domestic or regional markets. And we have to play a role into that as well. Because it kind of changes the dynamics of the trading.
And on the subject of geography, how do these strategies differ across, say, between North America, Europe, and Africa?
Well, there are places where you see more and more industrial asset, midstream, downstream asset being developed. Take the US as an example. We've seen over the last 2 to 3 years an acceleration of projects, refineries or primary production addressing US needs, Canada, Mexico. So as I mentioned, regional approach. And we've seen more and more of that coming up. And we are trying to support the development of those new assets, which are addressing their own markets. The way we do that is by usually explaining to the lenders the products, because they can be pretty specific. Yeah. And at Traxys, we have a knowledge on very many products, critical mineral space products, which are not really mainstream, that some larger trading houses don't really do. Mm-hmm. And we make a specialty of that. And we have to explain the market dynamics, pricing, supply, to the lenders of those projects to make them I would say happier, if I can use that expression, that the risk they will take in providing money for the development of these industries is a sound decision to make. So we try to help explaining, we try to help by providing long-term supply as well, so that they will see that there's no lack of supply to make the operation work, to create money, and for them to get over time their money back. We can also, on the other side, demonstrate that we can bring to the market the finished product as well, to take over market liquidity, which is critical for an asset in construction. So there are different ways to get there. But maybe if I can come back to the supply side and the previous question, because there's a point that is, from a trading perspective, very critical. The way to secure supplies, well, you can always have I would say, regular commercial discussion to offtake some products when production is there for picking. But you can also try to partner a bit more with the supplier, providing money for its own development, like can be a mine development, can be a brownfield development. You provide money in exchange of offtakes so that you secure the units for the long term.
Right.
Once in a while, you can even discuss equity partnership to a small extent, because I don't believe it's the role of a trading house to provide equity money. You have specific boutiques for this kind of instrument. But we try to be ubiquitous in the way we approach a project, to provide support, ensure that the production comes in, and then take over the molecules to bring to the market and to the end buyers. Logistics is an important piece as well. We've seen recently some frictions in the supply chain, and one way to dodge the problem is to have buffer stocks left and right. So being able to store production, to continue servicing your customer base, I think is pretty important. Of course, it doesn't really answer the problem if it's a long-term problem, because at some point you eat up your inventory and there's no more you can deliver. But if we're talking some short-term issues like logistics, COVID type of issues, that probably plays a role to continuing servicing the industry.
Okay. Excellent. Just looking at the big picture, how is Traxys approaching supply chain resilience, particularly in light of geopolitical tensions and resource nationalization?
So I will read a little bit what I just said, because I covered, I think, part of that point previously. For us, Traxys, the way to secure units is by way of supporting financially the production. Yep. That's what we do in my group, what I do within the Traxys group. So we provide money to the suppliers in exchange of long-term offtakes. We provide to lenders, as I mentioned, sometimes financial supports like floors in the contracts, even though the mainstream for us is really to prepay production. We have to go every time, I think, further upstream. I mean, when I started in Traxys 12 years ago, it was simpler to make a prepayment on a producing asset, and there was less competition. Today, competition is everywhere. So you have to go upstream more and more, so you have to address more needs of development. So greenfield projects is probably where today we spend most of our time. But then again, I think the concept of providing money against a future offtake today is very, very useful. And we work with the banking community. We know all the banks that are involved into the mining space, and we try to co-design, co-arrange transactions with them. They understand what we can bring to the table. They know our past performance, so they are comfortable with Traxys being the off-taker and ensuring liquidity to the production asset. So this is a big piece of what we do to secure the flows for the long run.
And do you see any additional sourcing models you believe will really define the next decade for your company?
I think what we'll see is more and more regional production to consumption. But there's one element that is getting traction, and not only because there's political pressure, it's recycling. I think going forward, the concept is that you don't rely so much on primary production, but you rely as well on secondary production through the recycling industry that is difficult to understand, difficult to read, different maturity depending where you speak into Asia, Europe, or the US. But very clearly, this is picking up, and we see more and more discussions project to recycle, as an example, spent car batteries to reproduce black mass. It is becoming today a marketable product, even if it's really an industrial product. It's certainly not a commodity.
Yep.
But recycling, yes, very certainly something that we have to spend much more time on. There are regulations coming up in Europe in 2050, supposed to be 100% recycling. To be honest, it's going to be complicated, but it gives a trend. And we have to find a way to accommodate this. It's an ancillary supply for us next to the primary production. And it's actually very interesting. So it's something that we need to develop, and everybody will have to develop this new industry, because I think it's a necessity from an environmental perspective, in any case. And we'll get there very soon. We are already in 2026, so it's 24 years in Europe to get there. In the other spaces like US, I don't know. I'm not close enough to that, but I think the trend will be there as well. Mm-hmm. In Asia, of course, they are pretty advanced.
Yeah. Thank you. And just building on that, resilience is a word that we hear a lot these days. With increasing pressure to localize and friendshore supply chain, how do you see the role of global traders like Traxys evolving?
Yeah, so this is not a simple one, because a trading house purpose is more to provide market visibility, liquidity to an asset, and not so much to participate into the cost of its development, which can be very, very expensive. Mm-hmm. And takes a long time. So our role is more to explain realities to investors and to support those investors' discussions. We've been doing that on lithium a lot lately, on black mass a lot lately. Discussing also with public, in the public sphere. I mean, everybody knows that in the US there's a lot of, I would say, liquidity offered by the US state to develop onshore project into the US. Yep. This is a trend we see everywhere. We see a lot of public-private arrangements in Europe as well, even though in Europe the industrial people are a bit less bullish than in the US, and I think it's a bit too slow. Mm-hmm. to come to a decision to co-invest with the state's money or EU money. But in the US you see that. So our role is really to demonstrate and show to the investors that what they are investing into is an asset that will make money, that is required from a strategic perspective as well. So we try to wrap that up into a global discussion, not necessarily a funding discussion, but very certainly a marketing, a trading discussion.
And do you think there's a risk that protectionist policies could hinder the global flow of critical minerals? Well,
we've seen news of late that goes that way. So the question is, there again, that if you take rare earth as an example, where we all know that the issue is the processing. Mm-hmm. So we need to see new units, processing units elsewhere than in China. So you have projects left and right, and we have to find a way to promote them. What we do these days is more to work at the level of the primary production, on the mines themselves, and we have a number of agreements with developers to support by taking over part of their production. But very certainly, onshoring assets is the only way to get there. And I think that trend is not too recent, but accelerated over the last 4 or 5 years, very certainly. It's there to stay, it's going to accelerate. So it's becoming a new market reality.
And now with increasing pressure to localize and friendshore the supply chains, if you were advising a government or a mining CEO today, what's the one strategic move that they should make to future-proof their critical minerals supply chain?
Yeah. Sometimes they do forget that if you build a plant somewhere to service your domestic network, you still need to have a feed to go to the plant first. So we try today to always remember people that mining is important first, because you need the raw material to go for processing. So you need to think holistically on this whole value chain from the ground up to the end buyer, and not only by segment. because otherwise you do take a risk that the industry you want to develop is not secured enough for lack of feed. So the feed is very, very important. And today it's still essentially from mining. I have no specific understanding of whether there's recycling for rare earth as an example, but certainly this will come into play at some point in time. But yeah, our advice is always to think globally on the whole chain of value from the very mine to the customer, because that's the only way to understand the dynamics of a flow.
Fair. And with that being said, what do you think the biggest blind spot is within the industry that they have to overcome to improve the supply chain resilience?
Well, I'm not sure if there's a specific one, to be honest. Funding is an issue because usually it's very expensive, but people understand that investment is required to get there. And sometimes investors are not specialists. Rarely they are specialists of those type of products. So there's no blind spot. It's just that it's a growing process. It's a growing understanding for the people investing into that space to understand it better, which is where we can play a role, because by definition we are in that universe for many, many years. So it's more an educational process, I believe, than something that has been totally overlooked.
Fair. And are there any specific market trends that you're watching most closely that could reshape the critical minerals trade within the next 3 to 5 years?
It's a difficult question. I'm not sure I have a clean answer. Can you just rephrase it?
Yeah. What market trends are you watching most closely at the moment that could reshape the critical minerals trade in the next 3 to 5 years?
Well, assuming that the buying markets continues to grow, the only trend that I see is continuation and onshoring some industries, making sure that you diversify your resources from places where they could have the idea of putting a ban or reducing the export flows. So the only way to get there is really to get to this minimum level of diversification and be totally autonomous in processing those raw materials into something that you can bring to your market. Yeah. So independence is becoming the key word. You cannot really rely, as we did in the past, on a few origins to cover all your needs, because basically what you would take there is to take a bet, and you don't really know what's going to happen. When we had this cobalt ban in DRC some time ago, it did create some issues into the cobalt market, right? So you need there to be able and nimble enough to continue servicing your customer in spite of some exportation interdictions. So diversification, I think, is really the key word.
Okay. Excellent. Well, William, thank you so much for sharing your insights. It's clear that securing critical minerals is not just about supply, it's about strategy, collaboration, and foresight. So thank you very much for your time today.
You're welcome. Thank you.